Elidor by Garner. Planchette. The telephone rang while Mr. Watson was having breakfast. "That was the Brodys," he said when he came back to the table. "They're giving a party for their two on the 29th, and ours are invited. There'll be a card in the post, but John Brodie wanted to know now so that the date can be fixed. It'll be your night out," he said to the children, "to make up for when your mother and I go to the Greenwoods New Year's dance." "I'm still not sure about that," said Mrs. Watson. "They're young to be left." "They're plenty old enough to look after themselves," said Mr. Watson, "aren't you?" "Do we have to go to this party?" said Nicholas. "Of course," said Mrs. Watson. "It'll be great fun. And the Brodys are such nice people. We ought to see more of them." "But we don't know the kids," said Nicholas. "It sounds deadly. I can't stand past the parcel." "We've accepted now," said Mr. Watson, "and it lasts till 11:30, so I think you'll find it's quite a grown-up party." "Oh, heck," said Nicholas. "I must remember to put them on the Christmas card list," said Mrs. Watson. David came in from outside. "Dad, have you seen the front door? It isn't half a mess." There were 3 gashes in the door. 2 of them were cut an inch into the oak, but the third was more of a dent, as if it had been made with less force than the others. "I thought I heard banging in the night," said Mrs. Watson, "but I must have turned over." "But this is vandalism," said Mr. Watson. "We're being persecuted. It's intolerable. Really, the lengths they'll go to just to vent their spite. Why, this must have been done with an axe." "That's what you must expect when you have overspill in a decent area," said Mrs. Watson. "They shouldn't be allowed to build out in the country. People aren't going to change when they move from the city, and goodness knows what it will do to the property values. It's sheer vandalism," said Mr. Watson. But later that day he filled the gashes with a wood compound and tightened the hinges in the door catch, which seemed to cure the vibrations. "I thought a touch of the screwdriver would do the trick," he said. The party loomed. The Brodys lived in a big house that had stood by itself among fields, but was now surrounded by the local council's new estate. Both the children went to boarding school. "It's going to be wet," said Nicholas as they set out on the night. I don't think so, said Mr. Watson. "Hard frost, clear sky. It'll stay like this for a couple of days at least. The glass is very steady." "I mean the party," said Nicholas. Jennifer and Robert Brodie met the Watsons formally on the doorstep. There were about a dozen other guests, and they drank fruit cup. They played games to break the ice. These involved pushing a matchbox from nose to nose and mixing the girls' shoes up and then having to find the owners. Then they danced to gramophone records, but Helen was the only one of the 4 who could dance. Nicholas had had 2 lessons, which made him more wretched than anybody. There were excuse-me dances and novelty dances and forfeit dances. Those without a partner had to dance with a mop. At 9 o'clock they went into supper. There was a game with name cards to decide who sat where, but Nicholas cheated so that the Watsons were together at the far end of the table. "Isn't it smoshing?" said Helen. 2.5 hours more, said David. "Can't we go now?" said Roland. But the food was good. The Brodie children called their father Jojo, and he told funny stories all the time. Then everybody started to pull crackers. Roland pulled his with Helen. He unrolled the paper hat and read the motto, and shook the cracker to see if it was empty. Something dropped on the table. "What's up, Roland?" said David. "Are you feeling sick?" "What have you got?" said Roland. "A hat and a motto, same as you. What else?" "Only one of those useless junks you always have in crackers." "What is it?" "A tie clip, or something of that kind. A sword made of pink plastic. It says Hong Kong on the back." "I've got a spear," said Roland. "Mine's a little plastic goblet," said Helen. "What have you got, Nick?" said Roland. "Please, Roland," said Helen. "Please don't go on." "What's inside your cracker?" said Roland. "Calm down," said Nicholas. You'll have them thinking you've gone balmy." "Tell me what's in that cracker besides the hat and the motto." "Oh, that," said Nicholas. "A pink brick." "Do you want it?" "A pink brick? You mean a stone?" "Oh, good grief, Roland, not again. Anyway, it's a dice, and it's a pretty poor one, too. The spots aren't coloured." "It's shaped like a stone. It could be made of stone, even if it is a dice," said Roland. "Well, it isn't. It's made of plastic, and so's everyone else. And so's everything else." It's pushing things a bit, said David. Are you saying that Mailbron's sending us souvenirs from Hong Kong? I don't know what I'm saying. It's true. That's true, said Nicholas. But it's not a coincidence. Of course it's a coincidence, said Nicholas. Then if it is, said Roland, it coincides with something. You don't have a coincidence on its own. And what it coincides with is the treasures. It makes them more real. David crossed and uncrossed his eyes. You can't laugh them off now, said Roland. Everything's linked. Mailbron said so. Even if these are bits out of a cracker, they're part of something else and you can't get away from it. Oh, do belt up, said Nicholas. Are we all happy down at this end of the table? Said Mr. Brodie, appearing behind David's shoulder. Plenty of what you want. More pudding, fruit cup. Thanks, we're fine, said Nicholas. Roland went through the rest of the evening in a daze, which insulated him from the round of games and dances that followed. By about 11 o'clock, everyone was tired of dancing and nobody could think of any fresh games. They all sat round the room, and it looked as though the last 30 minutes were going to drag into exhaustion. I know, said Jennifer Brodie. Let's have a séance, like we had last Christmas. Please, Jojo. Oh, yes, let's, several others said. Right you are, said Mr. Brodie. But don't go scaring yourselves. It's only a parlour game, remember? There's nothing to it. What's a séance? Said Helen. Talking to ghosts, table rapping, and that sort of thing, said Nicholas. I don't want to do it, said Roland. It sounds too creepy. Come on, said David. It's Christmas, and you heard him say it's only a game. Please may we use Granny's planchette? Jennifer asked her mother. It's more fun with that. And you had it out for your party last night. If you take care of it, darling, said Mrs. Brodie. Yes, Mummy. There was a conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Brodie at the door. But all Roland heard was, not as if they're old enough. Scribble, nothing frightening. Our Granny was a spiritualist, said Robert Brodie, and she had this planchette for getting messages from Grandpa. All he ever said was, bury me under the river. And did you? Said Nicholas. You try it, said Robert. Mrs. Brodie came back into the room, holding a small heart-shaped board with a pencil sticking through a hole at the pointed end. The board stood on casters so that it could move in any direction. The thing is, said Jennifer, that we all sit round the table, and whoever works the planchette lays their right hand on it very gently, and the board travels across the paper on these wheels, the pencils touching the paper, so you get what's called automatic writing, only you mustn't watch what you're doing, because it's not you writing, it's the other side. Sounds corny to me, said Nicholas. No, it isn't, said Jennifer. If you try to write deliberately, the board skids about. Now who's going to do it? I think it's time the young Roland did his stuff, said Mr. Brodie. He's been very quiet all evening. I'd rather not, said Roland. It's only fun, said Robert. Roland was hushed to the table, where the planchette was laid on the back of a roll of wallpaper. The writing's big, said Jennifer, so you'll need plenty of room. Put your finger tips on the planchette very lightly. That's it. Now everyone sit still. You mustn't speak. Think of nothing, and if the board moves, Roland, don't look at it. It's best if you keep your eyes closed all the time. I'll do the talking. Right, off we go. They all sat round the table. Complete silence was impossible. Some of the girls started giggling almost at once. Shh, said Jennifer every few seconds. My arm's going numb, said Roland. Can I have a rest? No, said Jennifer. Shh. 2 minutes went by, and Jennifer cleared her throat. Is anyone there? She said to the ceiling. Is anyone there? The planchette jerked, as if Roland had a cramp in his arm, and the pencil made a formless scribble on the wallpaper. Is anyone there? Said Jennifer, and she nodded excitedly and stuck her thumb up. The planchette scribbled again. Who is it? The planchette moved along the paper in loops like someone's first attempt at writing. Not bad, Roland, said Nicholas. I'm not doing anything. Shh, said Jennifer. Who is it? My arm's gone cold, said Roland. I can't feel anything. If you talk, you'll spoil it, said Jennifer. Look. What's happening? Said Roland. Helen squeaked. Ha ha. Male brawn, Helen squeaked. Ha ha, said Nicholas. What do you want? Said Jennifer. The pencil moved, drew a unicorn. What's that? Said Jennifer, speaking precisely. An amoeba, said David. Nom 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 nom. I do not understand, said Jennifer. The pencil scribbled again. Another unicorn. And then, male brawn. I still can't understand, said Jennifer. Please tell me more. The pencil swept across the paper, and then it wrote. It drew a unicorn again, and then it wrote, Findhorn. Findhorn! Cried Helen. What? Said Roland. What? The planchette immediately slid away. Did you write that? Male brawn, this unicorn? Oh, you shouldn't have stopped, said Jennifer. It was coming so well. Enough's enough, said Mr. Brodie. He's trying to tell us about Findhorn, said Roland. The song of Findhorn. Remember, Findhorn's a unicorn. He had to keep trying. All right, you did it nicely, said Nicholas. The other guests were staring. Your writing's crummy, but you always could draw. You'd be even better with practice. It wasn't me. Try it yourself. Okay, said Nicholas. I will. He put his fingers on the board as Roland had done. Go on, write your name. Okay, cool off. But no matter how he tried, Nicholas could not manage the planchette. It rolled in all directions. One of the boys laughed. Here, give it to me again, said Roland. He may be wanting to tell us something else. Quick. I think that about wraps things up for tonight, don't you people? Said Mr. Brodie. Carriage is at 11:30, you know. He became brisk, and Mrs. Brodie removed the planchette. Everyone started to pick up coats in the hall and say thank you. Some were waiting for their parents, and others were being taken home by Mr. Brodie. He switched on the outside light and opened the door to go and bring his car round to the front of the house. A white mist coiled through the doorway into the hall. Oh dear, what a bore, said Mrs. Brodie. It won't be much fun driving in this. Those who aren't going with John had better take your coats off. Your parents may be some time. Put the gramophone on, Jen, and we'll have another dance. I think it'd be quicker walking, don't you? Said Nicholas. It's not far. Yes, said David. Really, we mustn't stay. Thanks all the same. Can we ring up home to stop Dad from turning out, please? Said Nicholas. Certainly, said Mrs. Brodie. If you're sure that's what you want to do. Nicholas rushed to the telephone. Hello, Dad, he said. It's Nick. Look, don't bother to fetch us. We'll walk. No, honest, we'll be home by the time you could get here in this. We'll cut through the new estate and up Boundary Lane. You know, that cinder path by the allotments. Yes, of course, I know the way. Yes, we'll borrow a torch. Right, see you in about half an hour. They borrowed a torch, but found that there was no need to use it. The mist was a ground mist, and they could see clearly the tops of trees and houses in the bright moon. Anything rather than another dance, said Nicholas as they went round the drive from the house. Well done, Roland. You broke it up nicely. Old Jojo thought you were going to throw a fit. Roland did not answer. How did you pick up the knack of that board so quickly? Said Nicholas. Shut up, said Roland. You what? I said shut up. Oh, all right. They walked in silence. The concrete road of the new estate was easy to follow, except where it branched or protruded a roundabout. Near the Brodie's house, the estate was almost finished. The upstairs windows were dabbed with whitewash, and then, farther in, the windows were raw holes, and the moon shone through the roofs. After that, there was nothing but the mist, and they followed the curbstone across what was still a field. It was a lovely unicorn you drew, said Helen at last. Just like the one on my jug. I didn't draw it, said Roland. Oh, lay off, said Nicholas. Male Bron drew it, said Roland. He was trying to tell us something, and you stopped him. Now listen, said Nicholas. It's about time you grew up. Shall I tell you what that was all about? You've got this Maelbron thing on the brain. Okay, so you didn't fake it on purpose. You wrote it unconsciously, and you drew the unicorn because Helen found the jug when you were digging that hole in the garden. That's how people's minds work. If you'd read the books about it, you'd see for yourself that you're up the creek. Oh, shut up, said Roland. The road ended near a stile that led into the cinder path by the allotments. The path had chestnut palings on one side and a hedge on the other. It ran through a no-man's land between two built-up areas and came out on the road where the Watsons lived. At one point it crossed a stream over a bridge of railway sleepers. The path was so narrow that the children had to walk in twos. The night was absolutely still. "Careful by the bridge," said David. "There aren't any handrails. We're nearly—" The sound of air being torn like cloth burst on them, a dreadful sound that cracked with the force of lightning, as if the sky had split, and out of it came the noise of galloping hooves. There was no warning, no approach. The hooves were there, in the mist, close to the children, just ahead of them, on top of them, furious. "Look out!" They fell sideways, against paling and hedge, as a white horse charged between them out of the moonlight, pulling the mist to shreds. All about them was hoof and mane and form, and they heard the horse gallop away along the path that led the stile into the field, and to leap the stile into the field. The children clung to each other. "Is everyone okay?" said Nicholas. "Yes. I've ripped my coat." "That was a near do," said David. "I didn't hear it till it clattered on the bridge. Did you?" "It's probably bolted from the riding school," said Nicholas. "It didn't have a saddle on," said David. "It's broken out of its stable," said Helen. "They wouldn't have left it outside in the winter." "Yes," said Nicholas. "Did you see the mess it was in? It must have fouled some barbed wire." "But wasn't it a beauty?" said David. "That mane." The children crossed the bridge and walked on toward the road. "I was scared," said Helen, "but the poor thing must have been more frightened than I was." "It couldn't have stopped," said Nicholas. "If we hadn't gotten out of the way, I'd have been trampled to bits. Don't say anything to Mum or Dad. They'd have a heart attack." "Gosh, that's put the wind up me," said David. "Its tail hit me in the face," said Helen. "Funny how the moonlight made it look so big, too," said Nicholas. "That and being on a narrow path." "I hope it's not in any pain," said Helen. "It may do more damage if it's still frightened. It could have killed us," said David. "Yes, but not a word," said Nicholas. They were on the road now. "Tidy yourself a bit, Roland. We don't want to look as though we've been beaten up." But Roland hung back in the middle of the road. "Come along, Roland. Keep together." "Why are you talking like this?" shouted Roland. "You all saw it. Why are you pretending? You saw the horn on its head." And that is the end of chapter 15.